Hey you guys, I just got my shipment of seed potatoes in, but it's not quite time to plant in the garden. That's great news though, because I do want to do a few things to get these potatoes ready to plant. I'm going to show you what I'm doing with the potatoes that I received from Wood Prairie Family Farm. And also I have two other collections of seed potatoes that I actually saved from my harvest last year. I saved them over the winter in two different ways, and I want to show you what actually happened because I found that this experiment was actually quite insightful. So first off, we have seed potatoes from Wood Prairie Family Farm. You may recall from previous videos, last year I began planting these certified organic, certified disease-free potatoes from Maine, and I loved growing them. They came in so many different varieties than what I could get at my feed store, and just the quality of what they send is head and shoulders above anything I've ever planted. So this year I actually have more, and this is what the box comes like. Opening up here. What I love about this is the first thing you see, you've got a little thank you card. This is a family-owned company. I love being able to support them and share their work. It's not easy growing anything organically, especially on a scale like this. But then as far as how I'm growing, I like that immediately I've got instructions on what I need to do when these seed potatoes come in. So this is the first thing that it shares, is what to do when you get them. And then there's also more information in this little pamphlet on how to plant, like preparing the soil or cutting the seed if we need to cut any of the seed potatoes, planting, basically everything we need to know to grow the potatoes. Now, on the back here is specific instructions on green sprouting, and that's what I'm going to be doing today. It says that green sprouting is optional, so if you don't get your potatoes in time to be able to green sprout before you plant, this is optional, but it's something I do have time to do, so I am doing it this year. And basically what it is that you want to begin green sprouting or chitting about 4 weeks before expected planting date. Warm the uncut tubers at 70 degrees in the dark for about a week. So the good news is that I actually got this shipment about a week ago, and it's been inside a 75 degree room. So that's fantastic. I didn't really realize that I did that, but I did. And then after that, expose to the light as soon as sprouts appear, and then lower the temperature to 50 degrees. Light will turn the sprouts green and keep them short and stocky. Green sprouting reduces 10 to 14 days from field growing time and is highly recommended for market gardeners. And then if you don't get them in time to green sprout, it says to simple seed warming, 70 degrees for 48 to 72 hours prior to planting will help improve germination and yield. Warming the seed is superior to planting cold seed. So we have a couple of options, and this really again depends on how soon you get your potatoes compared to when you need to plant. For me, being able to hasten the sprouting 10 to 14 days is a huge thing because I'm in the South and potatoes don't like growing in the heat. So the sooner that I can get them up and growing, the better possibility I'll have of getting a better harvest. That's why I'm definitely doing the green sprouting this year. Last year I didn't have time to do it optimally, so it'll be fun to see if I can get a better harvest this year by green sprouting. So let's take a look at what's inside the box. So the seed potatoes come in these nice little sacks. This one, Caribe, was one of my favorites last year. I'm so excited to grow this again. It was a quick producer and we loved the taste of it. It was very, very nice. Next is dark Red Norland. This is one that has always produced well in my garden, and it's a great red potato for salads, but specifically I'm growing more of this because I was able to can the dark Red Norland and they kept their shape in canning. So this is a fantastic one that I'm actually growing more of so that I can can them. Next I have Huckleberry Gold. This is a new one. This is one that's supposed to be fantastic in flavor. I'm not sure how well it'll do in my climate because I am in the South and this is more of a medium maturing variety. Short maturing varieties tend to do best in the South where I am, but I'm gonna try to maybe see if this one can work because I've heard from so many people, including some of you guys, that tell me that this is a fantastic flavored potato. So I'm really hoping that it works out for me. Next I have Prairie Blush. This is kind of a Yukon Gold cross that Wood Prairie came up with. I've always wanted to grow this because I love Yukon Gold, so we'll see how it does. I actually tried growing it last year in my midsummer planting, which I'm going to share with you in a minute. My weather did not make that work, but I wanted to try it again for the spring planting. Next we have Red Cloud. This was one I tried for the first time last year, and my favorite part about Red Cloud is that it stores for a really long time. So this was the last one of my potatoes that I grew to sprout in my pantry. So this is one that I can definitely rely on for longer storage when the other ones don't maintain their quality for long. And finally I've got Yukon Golds because they're my very favorite. Have I said favorite on several of them? Maybe I have. But Yukon Golds are ones that I always can rely on in my southern climate. I love them for mashed potatoes. I definitely want to grow lots of those. So those are the varieties that I'm growing. And the next thing I want to do is open these up and see if any of them have started to sprout or if they are still in dormancy and I need to warm them up by green sprouting them. All right, let's open up the Yukon Gold first. Okay, looking at these Yukon Gold potatoes, they are just starting to sprout, which means I will be putting them in light to try to get them to sprout a little bit more. This is great because they've already broken dormancy, so they'll be ready to go in the garden whenever my garden is ready for it. Now what I'm going to do is take an old salad bowl container here, and I'm just going to put these here in that. And I like to tear off this so I can keep my varieties together. And I have two of these, so I'll put the other sack of Yukon Golds in here too. So I will be putting those in the light. I'll show you that in just a minute. Let's take a look at some of the other ones. Red Cloud. Now I don't anticipate Red Cloud to have sprouted yet because it has a very long dormancy. So I'm thinking I might have to green sprout this. Oh, yay! It has started to sprout. This is fantastic. So this has started to sprout too. You can see these little sprouts, and all I need to do is get these in the light. Yay! I won't have to wait too long to plant these. They'll be ready to go. Next we have Huckleberry Gold. These are similar to the Yukon Gold. They have a little bit of sprouting, very small. So these will go into the light, so hopefully they can start sprouting a little bit more before we plant. Next we have Prairie Blush. Okay, these are starting to sprout too, just a little bit. Just a little bit. They just broke dormancy. Caribe. These have more than broken dormancy. Those sprouts are quite a bit larger, so these are going to be ready to go in the garden probably before some of the other ones that had just started to sprout. But that's exciting because they'll be ready to go very soon. Dark Red Norland. I imagine these have probably sprouted because usually they don't have a huge, very long dormancy, so I bet they have started to sprout. Yep, they definitely have. They have a lot of sprouts going. These are going to need to get in the garden as soon as I can get them in. And I do plan on doing some early potatoes here in the greenhouse in grow bags like I did last year. You can check out this video to see how I did that, and also this video to see the results. But this I may just go ahead and plant in the grow bag, like maybe today, because these are definitely ready to go. Of course, a lot of the other ones I'm going to save for the garden, but a couple of these I may go ahead and plant because they're ready. So as you can see, most of these potatoes that I got from Wood Prairie have broken dormancy. I think part of that, again, is because I did get these a week, 2 weeks, I can't remember. It's been several days when I got these in the mail, and then they were in dark conditions, 70 to 80 degrees, which is what Wood Prairie recommends to try to get the tubers warmed up before putting them in the light. But I wanted to compare those with some potatoes that I saved from last year's planting. And I saved them in two different ways. I thought it was kind of interesting because I'd never saved my own seed potatoes from year to year. There is a risk associated with that, in that if you have problems with potato diseases in your soil, which I don't know that I've ever noticed it before, but I've also never saved seed potatoes before, so I know it's a slight risk. But I thought, let's just try to see if I could save the results of the first generation for this year, and then just continue starting with new, fresh, disease-free potatoes in the future. So let's start out with this box. These were potatoes that I planted fresh from Wood Prairie Farm that I bought back in June of last year. I planted them the beginning of July with the hope of having a fall harvest. But we had a really hot summer and they did not do well. I could just tell the plants themselves were long and spindly and flopping over. what I learned later is that that is an indication of heat stress. And so they actually didn't produce well. What they did produce though was basically clones of each other. They produced enough to save for another crop of seed potatoes. So when I harvested them, I kept them in this box and I covered them with burlap. So I had a little bit of, I don't know if I moistened the burlap, I may have moistened them, but this was like way back in the fall, so it's long dried out. But I kept them in this box. And I kept them in my garage, which in our winters here in Arkansas, the garage is going to be most of the time 40s, 50s degrees. It's never going to go below freezing. And in the wintertime, it's not going to get hot either. So that's the conditions that I stored them in. Definitely wasn't all that humid, although like I said, I did moisten this so that there could be some humidity. And let's take a look at these. These are starting, this one at least, is starting to break dormancy, but very much smaller. But it's starting to sprout just a little bit. And I also have some Yukon Gold here. These are not sprouting at all. Like there's no evidence of any kind of eyes coming from these Yukon Gold. So what I'm gonna need to do with these Yukon Gold, these have been in the garage. I'm gonna put them inside the house like I did the ones that came from Wood Prairie last week or so, and I'm going to warm them up in the house and hopefully hasten that green sprouting. And then I also have Prairie Blush. This was Prairie Blush that I planted in July from Wood Prairie. Again, all I harvested was pretty much something I could save for seed. Most of these do not look like they've broken dormancy yet. So I'll probably just put this whole box, cover it back up, be in the dark, and then check it maybe in a week or so and see if there are any sprouts emerging. So it's not just a matter of conditions for potatoes to sprout, it's also the variety itself and how long does it usually take for them to come out of dormancy, and that can vary. But the conditions definitely play a part. So I will definitely be putting these in the warm house to get them sprouted. Now here's another experiment that I thought was actually really fun. So I planted my spring planting that you guys saw last year. We'll put the video here for you to look at. This is when I planted in raised beds in my garden. And what I also did is I planted that midsummer planting, which resulted in these. And then I planted a late summer planting for a fall harvest. That was the goal. I planted it in early August, I think. So it was maybe mid-August. So it was pretty late. My goal was to get them growing and get them up and then cover them in a freeze so that maybe I could harvest some potatoes from it. Well, we ended up having an early freeze, an early really low freeze that the cover didn't help at all. And so I actually ended up losing the plants quicker than I had expected to. But again, like in the case of these, I was able to harvest enough to be able to save for seed potatoes. These though, I did not harvest completely. I harvested them to see what I had, and then I decided, let's keep them in the garden all winter and see if they'll store that way. So what I did is I dug a hole in that same raised bed that I grew the potatoes in, and I put a bunch of straw in that hole. I put the potatoes on top of the straw, and then I put more straw on top of that, and then I put more soil on top of that, and then covered the whole thing with straw. So the thought was that by putting them underneath and putting them in the ground, that they would be insulated from freezing temperatures, because underneath the ground is usually a way to do that, at least in my climate for sure, and especially with the mulch we had on top. And maybe it would store better because it would be able to get trickles of the rain and the moisture, which potatoes like the humidity when they're being stored. So that was my experiment with that. Last week we had a warm up, and I was afraid that if I didn't get those potatoes harvested, then maybe they might start rooting, and I didn't want them to grow in the same place. So I harvested them, and this is what I found. They look the same as they looked last fall when I buried them back. I see a little bit of sprouting here on this one, but not a whole lot. This is a red, I think it's dark red Norland, but I can't remember. This is for sure Yukon Gold. No sprouting on this one yet. So I will put this in the dark and put this in the house with this And then also if I start seeing some sprouts, then I'll bring those into light. But that was a cool experiment, I thought, because I planted them in August and then I harvested them in October and then buried them and then harvested them again in February to bring them out to plant. So it'll be fun to compare. Again, I definitely love starting with seed potatoes that are fresh, that I know are certified organic, certified disease-free. Starting with fresh potatoes is always fun, and all these different varieties, all these different options that I'm going to be able to do, trying to do some of the ones I did last year that I loved so much, like the Caribe and the Red Cloud, but then also trying some new ones like the Prairie Blush and the Huckleberry Gold. This will be so fun. Another experiment that I'm going to be doing this year is I'm going to be planting both in my raised beds, in ground beds, in grow bags, in the greenhouse early like I mentioned, but I'm also going to try to grow some in my green stalk vertical planter. This is something I've never done before, and it'll just be a big experiment to see how do potatoes grow in the green stalk planter, and we'll compare that to how they grow in the garden. So if you're following me here, if you're subscribed and you see my videos coming up, I'll definitely be sharing with you how that goes throughout the course of the season. I'm always a fan of experimenting in the garden, and potatoes in my area are not super easy because they don't like the heat and we get hot so fast here in Arkansas. So it seems like I'm always trying to come up with ways that will help me grow potatoes better in my climate. So if you're interested in growing potatoes, let me point you out to one more resource that you will definitely want to check out, and that is podcast episodes that I did with the owner of Wood Prairie Family Farm, Jim Garrettson. He has so much great information on those podcasts. I think there are 3. There are a couple from last year about growing potatoes, and then one in December of last year about choosing the kind that will work better for your kitchen and your climate. If you want to grow potatoes, these episodes are a must listen because you're learning from the organic potato farmer himself. You are sure to get some great tips growing potatoes. I hope you've enjoyed this preview of what is coming in my garden this year when it comes to potatoes. And if you're interested in getting these certified organic, certified disease-free potatoes from Wood Prairie Family Farm, you can use my code JILL5 to get 5% off of your order. The link will be in the description below. Huge thanks for Wood Prairie Farm. I love their product, but they also are a sponsor of the podcast, and I'm very grateful that they sent me these seeds to try and share with you how they do in my garden. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on next week's video.